The people who save your life are rarely the ones everyone is watching. Warm, golden light poured from enormous crystal chandeliers onto the polished marble floor of the Grand Meridian Hotel in the heart of Manhattan, where the annual Foster Global Holdings Leadership Gala had transformed the elegant ballroom into one of the most exclusive gatherings in New York City. Through floor-to-ceiling windows, the skyline shimmered beneath a clear evening sky, while a live string quartet filled the room with soft music that blended effortlessly with quiet conversations about investments, innovation, and billion-dollar partnerships. Every table displayed flawless white linen, crystal glasses, fresh orchids, and silver candle holders that reflected the glow of the city beyond the glass. Business leaders, philanthropists, international investors, and public officials moved confidently through the ballroom, exchanging handshakes that carried the weight of fortunes and futures. At the center of it all stood Adrian Foster, the 41-year-old billionaire founder and chief executive officer of Foster Global Holdings. His tailored navy tuxedo, calm smile, and effortless confidence drew attention wherever he walked. Reporters waited outside for a glimpse of him, while executives inside hoped for only a few minutes of conversation. Adrian greeted every guest with practiced professionalism, discussing charitable initiatives, global expansion, and the company's newest technology projects. To everyone watching, the evening appeared flawless. Across the ballroom, Jasmine Carter quietly carried a polished silver serving tray between tables, refilling sparkling water, collecting empty glasses, and making certain every guest felt welcome. At 27 years old, she had become one of the hotel's most respected waitresses because she remembered names, noticed details, and anticipated needs before anyone spoke. Her crisp white shirt, perfectly pressed black apron, tailored black slacks, and polished shoes reflected the same professionalism she brought to every shift. Few guests noticed her. Fewer still realized she quietly observed every corner of the ballroom each time she crossed the room. Years of hospitality training had taught her that excellent service began with awareness. She noticed blocked exits, unattended bags, unusual behavior, and anything that could interrupt the safety or comfort of hundreds of guests. Those habits had become second nature, almost invisible even to herself. As she placed fresh coffee beside a table of investors, she briefly glanced toward the main entrance before continuing without hesitation. Nothing appeared obviously wrong, yet something felt different. The hotel's experienced security officers maintained their usual positions near the ballroom doors, speaking calmly through discreet earpieces while greeting arriving guests. Everything looked organized. Everything appeared normal. Adrian continued smiling as he thanked sponsors for supporting a new education initiative. Cameras flashed. Glasses were raised for a toast. Laughter echoed beneath the chandeliers. The atmosphere radiated celebration. Jasmine continued serving quietly, never drawing attention to herself. As she passed another table, she noticed 5 men entering the ballroom together. Their formal evening suits matched the event perfectly, yet something about them immediately caught her attention. None of them paused to admire the decorations. None accepted refreshments from passing staff. None joined the conversations filling the ballroom. Instead, they briefly scanned the room before exchanging subtle glances with one another. Their movements were disciplined, almost rehearsed. One quietly adjusted his jacket, while another looked toward the emergency exits instead of the stage where Adrian stood speaking. Most guests would never have noticed. Jasmine did. She slowed only for a heartbeat before continuing her route exactly as expected, careful not to reveal the concern quietly growing inside her. She reminded herself that unusual behavior alone proved nothing. Good hospitality required observation before judgment. Still, her instincts refused to relax. Every time she crossed the ballroom, she found herself noticing the same 5 men standing apart from everyone else, speaking very little while their attention repeatedly returned to Adrian Foster. Around them, the gala continued without interruption, filled with music, laughter, applause, and elegant conversation. Only Jasmine sensed that beneath the polished surface of the perfect evening, something unseen had already begun to change. The music continued beneath the golden lights of the Grand Meridian Hotel, but Jasmine Carter could no longer ignore the small details that had captured her attention. She moved gracefully through the ballroom with the same professional calm she had shown all evening, placing glasses on silver trays and offering polite smiles to guests who had no idea that her focus had shifted. The 5 men near the entrance were not causing a scene. They were not drawing attention. That was exactly what made them unusual. Most guests arrived at a celebration like this with excitement written on their faces. They looked toward the decorations, the stage, the famous guests, and the impressive displays of wealth surrounding them. These men did none of that. Their eyes moved across the room with careful awareness, studying the environment instead of enjoying it. Jasmine had worked in luxury hospitality long enough to understand the difference between someone who was simply observing and someone who was calculating. She did not jump to conclusions. She did not panic. She simply watched. Across the ballroom, Adrian Foster continued his speech about expanding educational opportunities through his company foundation. His voice carried naturally through the room as executives and guests listened with admiration. He spoke about creating opportunities for future generations and supporting communities through innovation. The crowd applauded warmly. Adrian smiled and thanked everyone for being part of the evening. To him, the gala represented another successful milestone in a career built on ambition and careful decisions. He had spent decades learning how to read markets, understand people, and recognize opportunities before others noticed them. Yet, even the most experienced leaders could miss something happening only a few feet away. Jasmine continued observing while performing her duties. She noticed one of the men briefly checking his surroundings before moving closer to the main event area. Another remained near a hallway leading toward private meeting rooms. A third watched the flow of guests entering and leaving the ballroom. Individually, each action seemed ordinary. Together, they created a pattern that made her instincts become more alert. She quietly approached a hotel supervisor carrying a tray of empty glasses. Without creating alarm, she spoke softly. "Could you ask security to take another look near the east entrance?" The supervisor noticed her serious expression and immediately understood that Jasmine was not making a casual request. "Did you see something?" he asked quietly. Jasmine glanced toward the group before answering. "I am not certain. I just think it deserves attention." The supervisor nodded and discreetly contacted the security team. No announcements were made. No guests were disturbed. The evening continued as planned. That was Jasmine's greatest strength. She understood that protecting people was not always about dramatic actions. Sometimes it was about noticing the smallest details before they became bigger problems. Meanwhile, Adrian stepped down from the stage and began greeting guests personally. Several investors approached him, asking questions about upcoming projects. Photographers captured the moment as he shook hands and thanked supporters. Jasmine watched from a distance, noticing that the 5 men had changed their position slightly. They were now closer to the area where Adrian was speaking with guests. The security team quietly increased their awareness around the room, but Jasmine remained calm. She continued serving, continuing the appearance of a normal evening while quietly tracking every movement around her. For years, people had seen her as someone who brought coffee, cleared tables, and offered polite service. They rarely considered the skills required to do that job at the highest level. Patience, awareness, communication, responsibility. Those qualities had trained her to see what others overlooked. As the orchestra began another song and the ballroom lights reflected across hundreds of glasses, Jasmine looked once more toward Adrian Foster. The billionaire CEO stood surrounded by success, recognition, and powerful people who believed they understood every possible risk. But the person who noticed the one thing everyone else missed was not standing on the stage. She was the woman quietly walking between the tables, carrying a silver tray, and paying attention. The evening at the Grand Meridian Hotel continued with perfect elegance on the surface, but beneath the polished conversations and soft music, a quiet sense of awareness had entered the room. Jasmine Carter remained focused on her responsibilities, moving between tables with the same professionalism that had made her one of the most trusted members of the hotel staff. To the guests, she was simply part of the service team. To herself, she was someone responsible for noticing what others might miss. Near the main entrance, the 5 unfamiliar men remained separated from the celebration around them. They did not interrupt conversations. They did not create attention. Yet Jasmine noticed that their positions kept changing in ways that did not match the relaxed atmosphere of a formal gala. She watched carefully while keeping her expression calm. Her experience had taught her that awareness was not about fear. It was about preparation. The hotel security team had quietly increased their observation after receiving Jasmine's discreet message. They did not approach the men immediately. They continued monitoring the situation while allowing guests to enjoy the evening without unnecessary concern. Adrian Foster, unaware of the quiet assessment happening around him, continued speaking with several business partners near the center of the ballroom. He was discussing a new charitable investment program when one of his advisors complimented the success of the event. Adrian smiled and looked around the room. "A company is only as strong as the people who support it," he said. The words were sincere, but he had no idea how meaningful they would become before the night ended. Jasmine noticed something else. One of the men briefly looked toward a private hallway connected to the executive meeting rooms. Another glanced toward the security desk before returning his attention to Adrian. Again, nothing alone seemed alarming, but together, the details formed a picture that Jasmine could not ignore. She approached the hotel manager once more, speaking in a low and respectful voice. "I think the security team should stay close to the executive area for the next few minutes." The manager studied her expression and immediately understood the seriousness behind her suggestion. "Are you sure?" he asked. Jasmine paused before answering honestly. "I hope I am wrong." That answer carried more weight than certainty. It showed that she was not trying to create drama. She was trying to protect people. The manager nodded and quietly informed the security supervisor. Across the ballroom, Adrian finished his conversation and began walking toward a group of investors near the executive area. The atmosphere remained warm. Guests laughed. Music continued. Cameras captured the celebration. Nobody wanted to believe that anything could disturb such a carefully planned evening. Jasmine watched Adrian move through the crowd and felt the importance of every second. She was not a security officer. She was not a bodyguard. She was a waitress who happened to understand that every person in the room mattered. Her strength was not found in authority or status. It came from attention, responsibility, and the courage to speak when something felt wrong. As Adrian approached the executive area, Jasmine placed the final glass onto her tray and looked toward the entrance one more time. The entire ballroom was still celebrating. The guests were still smiling. The music was still playing. But for Jasmine, the night had changed. She knew that sometimes the most important moments in life arrived quietly, hidden between ordinary seconds. And sometimes, the person who recognized those moments first was the person nobody expected to be watching. The music inside the Grand Meridian Hotel continued playing, but the atmosphere had quietly changed. The guests still smiled, conversations still flowed, and the elegant ballroom still appeared like the perfect picture of success. Yet behind the scenes, every member of the security team had become more alert. Because of one simple observation made by someone most people had overlooked. Jasmine Carter stood near the edge of the room with her silver serving tray resting against her arm, watching the flow of guests while maintaining the appearance of a normal evening. She knew the most important moments often happened without warning, and preparation mattered more than panic. Near the executive area, Adrian Foster was speaking with several investors about future projects. The billionaire CEO appeared completely comfortable, surrounded by people who admired his achievements and trusted his leadership. He had spent years building a reputation for recognizing risks before they became problems. Yet tonight, the person who noticed the warning signs first was not one of his executives or advisors. It was the waitress quietly moving through the ballroom. The hotel security supervisor received another update from his team and looked toward Jasmine. He walked over calmly, avoiding any action that could alarm guests. "You were right to mention your concerns," he said quietly. "We are monitoring the situation." Jasmine nodded. She did not look satisfied or proud. She simply looked relieved that someone else was paying attention now. "I just hope everyone has a safe evening," she replied. The supervisor appreciated her response. She was not seeking recognition. She was focused only on the people around her. A few minutes later, Adrian finished his conversation and prepared to move toward the private executive section where additional guests were waiting. The 5 unfamiliar men had also shifted their position, creating a situation that required immediate attention from the hotel's trained security professionals. The supervisor quietly communicated with his team, and they began guiding the situation without causing unnecessary concern among the guests. Jasmine noticed the subtle movement and understood that the security team was handling their responsibility. Still, she remained attentive. Then she saw Adrian begin walking toward the area where the security team was increasing its presence. For a brief moment, everything seemed to slow down. The sound of the orchestra faded into the background. The conversations around her became distant. Jasmine looked around the room and recognized that most people were unaware of what was happening. They were enjoying the celebration, trusting the people responsible for protecting them. That trust mattered. Her mind moved quickly, not with fear, but with clarity. She understood that the next few seconds could determine whether everyone remained safe and calm. Jasmine placed her tray on a nearby service table and moved toward Adrian with purpose. She did not create a scene. She did not shout. She simply approached with the confidence of someone who understood the importance of timing. "Mr. Foster," she said politely, catching his attention. Adrian turned with a surprised expression. He recognized her as one of the hotel staff members who had been serving guests throughout the evening. Before he could ask why she had approached him, Jasmine calmly guided him a few steps away from the crowded area and toward the safer side of the ballroom. Her action was subtle enough that most guests did not even notice. Adrian looked at her with confusion. "Is everything all right?" he asked. Jasmine answered carefully. "The security team is handling something. It is better to stay here for a moment." For the first time that evening, Adrian saw something different in her expression. Not fear, not uncertainty, just responsibility. Within moments, hotel security moved into position and began managing the situation professionally. Guests remained calm as staff guided the flow of the room. The celebration that had been heading toward a potential crisis was now under control because someone had noticed the signs early. Adrian looked back toward Jasmine, realizing that the person who had quietly carried drinks between tables had just made the most important decision of the night. And for the first time, the billionaire CEO understood that courage did not always arrive with authority, a title, or a position of power. Sometimes it arrived wearing a simple apron and choosing to act when everyone else was still looking away. The Grand Meridian Hotel remained calm as the security team continued handling the situation with careful professionalism. The music had stopped temporarily, and hotel staff guided guests with quiet confidence while making sure everyone understood that there was no reason for panic. The elegant ballroom that had been filled with celebration moments earlier now carried a different atmosphere. Conversations became softer. Guests looked around with curiosity. They sensed that something unusual had happened, but they also noticed the calm response from the hotel employees and security professionals around them. Near the center of the room, Adrian Foster stood beside Jasmine Carter, still processing what had just occurred. For years, the billionaire CEO had been surrounded by advisors, executives, and specialists whose job was to anticipate problems before they appeared. He was accustomed to having experts protect his time, his investments, and his company. Yet tonight, the person who recognized the warning signs first was someone he had barely noticed before. Jasmine stood quietly beside him, making sure the situation remained stable before returning to her duties. Adrian looked at her with a mixture of surprise and gratitude. "How did you know something was wrong?" he asked. Jasmine looked toward the security team before answering. "I did not know for certain. I noticed things that did not match the environment." Adrian listened carefully. "What things?" Jasmine explained that most guests at a celebration like this showed curiosity and excitement. They looked at the decorations, the music, and the people around them. The 5 unfamiliar guests behaved differently. They paid attention to locations, movements, and exits instead of the celebration itself. She explained that in hospitality, small details mattered. A guest who seemed uncomfortable, a change in normal behavior, or something that felt unusual could be important. "I was not trying to assume anything about them," Jasmine said. "I just believed it was better to be careful." Those words stayed with Adrian. He realized that her actions were not based on fear or suspicion. They were based on responsibility. A hotel manager approached them and thanked Jasmine for her awareness. He explained that the security team had responded quickly because of her early observation. The situation had been handled before it could affect the guests. Several nearby employees who had witnessed the moment looked at Jasmine differently now. They had always known her as reliable, but they had never seen the level of awareness she carried with her every day. Adrian noticed this too. The woman standing beside him was not seeking attention. She was not waiting for praise. She had simply done what she believed was right. "You probably saved this entire event from becoming something very different," Adrian said. Jasmine shook her head gently. The security team did their job. I only noticed something and said something. Her humility surprised him. Many people would have accepted the spotlight after such a moment. Jasmine seemed more interested in making sure everyone was safe than receiving recognition. As the evening slowly returned to normal, guests began returning to their conversations. The orchestra resumed playing softly. Servers returned to their stations. The ballroom lights continued reflecting across the marble floors as if nothing unusual had happened. But for Adrian Foster, everything had changed. He looked around the room and saw something he had never considered before. The people who protected important moments were not always the ones standing in expensive suits or holding powerful positions. Sometimes they were the people quietly working in the background, paying attention when others were distracted. Before walking away, Adrian stopped Jasmine for one final question. Have you always been this observant? He asked. Jasmine smiled slightly. I think everyone notices more than they realize. The difference is whether we choose to pay attention. Adrian stood silently for a moment. That answer carried more meaning than any business advice he had received in years. Because the most valuable lesson of the evening was not about danger, security, or reputation. It was about awareness. And it came from the one person in the room who expected nothing in return. The Grand Meridian Hotel slowly returned to its elegant rhythm as the final guests continued their conversations beneath the warm glow of the chandeliers. The music had resumed, the servers moved between tables once again, and the atmosphere appeared almost identical to the beginning of the evening. Yet for Adrian Foster, nothing felt the same anymore. The Billionaire CEO stood near the edge of the ballroom, watching Jasmine Carter quietly arrange the remaining glasses at a service station. Only a few hours earlier, she had been just another member of the hotel staff in his eyes. Someone who provided excellent service but remained unnoticed among executives, investors, and influential guests. Now he understood that he had been looking at the room through the wrong lens. He had spent his entire career searching for exceptional people, but he had always expected them to appear in certain places. Boardrooms, universities, executive offices. He had never considered that extraordinary ability could exist behind a simple uniform. Adrian approached Jasmine as she prepared to return to her duties. I hope I am not interrupting, he said politely. Jasmine turned and smiled. Not at all, Mr. Foster. He looked thoughtful for a moment before asking, how did you develop that kind of awareness? Jasmine placed the final glass onto the tray before answering. I think it comes from paying attention to people. Adrian listened carefully. Jasmine explained that working in hospitality taught her something important. Every person entered a room carrying a different story. Some were celebrating. Some were nervous. Some were distracted. The responsibility of great service was not only about providing what people requested. It was about understanding what they might need before they asked. Over time, you learn to notice small things, she said. A guest who looks uncomfortable. Someone who seems unfamiliar with the environment. A change in the normal flow of a room. Adrian nodded slowly. Her explanation reminded him of business. Successful leaders often talked about recognizing patterns before others did. Yet he realized Jasmine applied that same principle to people rather than markets. Have you ever worked in security? He asked. Jasmine smiled. No, sir. I have always worked in hospitality. The answer surprised him. Then where did you learn all this? Jasmine looked toward the ballroom filled with guests and staff. Life teaches you to pay attention. Her response was simple, but Adrian sensed there was more behind it. He asked if she had always wanted to work at a luxury hotel. Jasmine paused briefly. I wanted to build a career where I could help people. Hospitality gave me that opportunity. She explained that she had studied management courses while working, learning about communication, emergency preparation, and leadership. She believed every role mattered when people worked together. Adrian looked around the ballroom again. The event had been saved because someone in a position many people overlooked had taken responsibility when it mattered most. A few executives nearby approached Adrian and asked about the staff member who had noticed the concern earlier. They expected him to describe her as simply a helpful employee. Instead, Adrian introduced her differently. This is Jasmine Carter. She is the person who reminded everyone tonight that awareness and courage do not come from a title. Jasmine looked slightly uncomfortable with the attention and politely thanked them before returning to her work. Adrian noticed that she did not seek admiration. She did not use the moment to ask for anything. She simply continued doing what she had always done. That detail stayed with him. Because in a world where many people chased recognition, Jasmine represented something different. She showed that true character was revealed not when everyone was watching, but when someone chose to do the right thing before anyone knew their name. The morning after the Grand Meridian Hotel Gala arrived with a quiet sense of reflection. The city of New York moved as quickly as always, with taxis crossing busy streets, office buildings filling with professionals, and thousands of people beginning another ordinary day. But inside Foster Global Holdings, the events of the previous night remained the subject of countless conversations. Employees who had attended the gala continued discussing the unexpected moment when a waitress had noticed what experienced professionals had overlooked. Adrian Foster sat inside his corner office overlooking Manhattan, but for the first time in years, the view outside the window was not the thing holding his attention. On his desk were reports, investment plans, and schedules filled with important meetings. Yet his thoughts kept returning to Jasmine Carter and the simple truth she had demonstrated. Awareness was not created by position. Responsibility was not limited to authority. Adrian had built his entire career by recognizing valuable opportunities before others did. He had invested in companies because he believed hidden potential existed everywhere. However, he realized that he had not always applied the same belief to people. Later that morning, Adrian requested a meeting with the hotel's management team. He wanted to understand more about the employee who had changed the entire direction of his thinking. The hotel manager spoke proudly about Jasmine. He explained that she had always been dependable, arriving early, helping new employees, and treating every guest with the same level of respect regardless of their background or status. She has never been interested in attention, the manager said. She simply believes doing a job well is something worth being proud of. Adrian listened carefully. Those words reminded him of a quality he rarely encountered in his world of business. Many talented people wanted recognition before they achieved results. Jasmine had achieved something extraordinary without expecting anyone to notice. Later that afternoon, Adrian returned to the Grand Meridian Hotel and found Jasmine preparing for another shift. The contrast between the previous evening and that moment was striking. Last night, she had stood at the center of attention. Today, she was back organizing tables and preparing for guests as if nothing unusual had happened. "You really came back to work today?" Adrian asked with a slight smile. Jasmine looked surprised to see him. "Of course, Mr. Foster. There are guests who need good service." Her answer made him smile because it represented exactly who she was. Adrian asked if she had considered accepting new opportunities after everything that happened. Jasmine listened politely, but explained that she valued her work and the people she served. "A person does not become important because someone finally notices them," she said. "They were important all along." Adrian carried those words with him. During the following weeks, he began making changes inside his company. He encouraged executives to listen more carefully to employees at every level. He created new programs focused on recognizing talent beyond traditional titles and backgrounds. He wanted his organization to become a place where people were valued before they had to prove themselves. Meanwhile, Jasmine continued living her life with the same humility she had always shown. She never described herself as a hero. She never told the story to gain attention. When people asked about that night, she simply said she was glad everyone was safe. Adrian eventually understood the deeper lesson behind her actions. Courage was not always loud. Leadership was not always visible. Sometimes the people who make the biggest difference are the ones quietly doing their jobs while the world looks somewhere else. And that was the truth Jasmine Carter had shown him. The most valuable qualities a person can have are often the ones that never need to announce themselves. Several months passed after the unforgettable evening at the Grand Meridian Hotel, but the lesson Jasmine Carter had shared continued influencing the people who had witnessed it. Inside Foster Global Holdings, changes that once seemed impossible slowly became part of the company culture. Executives who had spent years making decisions behind closed doors began listening more carefully to employees throughout the organization. Adrian Foster encouraged his leadership team to remember that valuable ideas could come from anyone, regardless of position or title. It was a simple change, but it represented a completely different way of thinking. One afternoon, Adrian visited the Grand Meridian Hotel again. This time, he did not arrive as a billionaire CEO attending a private event. He arrived as someone hoping to have a meaningful conversation. He found Jasmine preparing a table near the restaurant area, greeting guests with the same warmth and professionalism she had always shown. The attention from the previous months had not changed her. She was still the same person who believed every guest deserved respect and every responsibility deserved effort. "You know," Adrian said as he approached, "I have met thousands of successful people throughout my career. Investors, founders, executives, and leaders from around the world. But very few people have changed the way I think." Jasmine smiled politely. "I only did what anyone should do when they notice something important." Adrian shook his head slightly. "That is exactly why it mattered." He explained that many people had skills, knowledge, and experience, but fewer people had the willingness to act without expecting recognition. Jasmine listened quietly as he shared how the company had started a new initiative to identify talent from every level of the organization. The program was designed to support employees who showed leadership, creativity, and problem-solving abilities, even if they did not hold traditional management positions. "Everyone deserves the chance to be seen," Adrian said. Jasmine appreciated the idea, but she offered a different perspective. Being seen is important, but so is seeing others. Sometimes people are already doing incredible things. They just need someone to notice. Her words reminded Adrian of the first night they met. He had spent years searching for hidden opportunities in business, but he had overlooked the human opportunities around him. Later that year, Adrian invited Jasmine to speak at a company leadership event. She was hesitant at first. She did not consider herself a public speaker, and she had never wanted attention. But Adrian explained that her story was not about becoming famous. It was about showing others the value of awareness, responsibility, and compassion. Standing in front of hundreds of employees, Jasmine did not speak about being a hero. She spoke about teamwork. She spoke about the importance of paying attention. She spoke about how every person in a workplace contributes something meaningful, even when their role is not always visible. The audience listened carefully, because her message did not come from a position of power. It came from experience. Adrian watched from the side of the room, realizing that the greatest leaders are not always the people with the biggest offices or the most impressive titles. Sometimes they are the people who quietly choose to care when nobody is asking them to. After the event, several employees approached Jasmine to thank her for reminding them that their work mattered. She responded with the same humility she had shown from the beginning. "Everyone has a moment when they can make a difference," she said. "The important thing is being willing to notice it." And for Adrian Foster, that became the principle he carried forward. Because the most valuable people are not always the ones standing in the spotlight. Sometimes they are the ones quietly creating a better world around them, one thoughtful decision at a time. Years after the evening that changed his perspective, Adrian Foster often found himself returning to the same thought. Success had given him access to the most powerful rooms in the world, but it had also created a habit of looking for greatness in familiar places. He searched for talent in executive offices, universities, and corporate meetings. He looked for brilliance in resumes, achievements, and impressive titles. It took one unexpected evening at the Grand Meridian Hotel to teach him that some of the most valuable people are discovered only when someone takes the time to truly see them. The story of Jasmine Carter became a quiet reminder throughout Foster Global Holdings. Employees shared it with new team members, not because she had become famous, but because her actions represented something everyone could understand. Responsibility does not depend on a person's position. Courage does not require an audience. And character does not need permission to exist. Jasmine continued her journey with the same dedication she had always shown. She eventually advanced her education in hospitality leadership and management while continuing to support the people around her. She never described herself as someone who changed the life of a billionaire CEO. In her mind, she simply noticed a situation and responded the way any responsible person should. That humility was exactly what made her story so powerful. One year after the gala, Adrian invited Jasmine to attend a company anniversary celebration. This time, the invitation was not sent because she was part of the hotel staff. It was sent because she had become someone Adrian respected deeply. As she entered the event, employees who had heard her story welcomed her warmly. There were no assumptions about her uniform, her background, or her profession. They saw her as a person whose actions had inspired thousands. During the celebration, Adrian stepped onto the stage and spoke about leadership. He did not talk about profits, company growth, or market achievements. Instead, he shared a lesson he learned from someone who never expected anything in return. The strongest organizations are not built only by the people at the top, he told the audience. They are built by every person who chooses to care, every person who notices what others miss, and every person who acts with integrity when nobody is watching. Jasmine listened from the audience with a quiet smile. She did not need recognition. She had never searched for applause. Her greatest reward was knowing that one moment of awareness had encouraged others to become more thoughtful toward the people around them. After the event, Adrian and Jasmine stood together near the entrance of the building, watching employees leave and return home. The city lights reflected across the streets of Manhattan, creating the same kind of beautiful evening that had surrounded their first meeting. Adrian looked at her and said, "I spent my entire career learning how to recognize value. I just never realized I was looking in the wrong places." Jasmine smiled and replied, "Sometimes the people who make the biggest difference are not waiting for someone to notice them. They are already making a difference." Those words stayed with him, because the greatest lesson was never about wealth, influence, or power. It was about awareness. It was about understanding that every person carries something valuable, even when the world does not immediately see it. And sometimes, the person standing quietly in the background is the one who reminds everyone what true strength really means.